Americans, what is something us Europeans aren't ready to hear? Yoko Ono. I guess, stop acting so superior all the time when almost every single one of your nations has a military base from us protecting you across the world. We're assholes, not gonna argue that, but acting like we're just dumb barbarians when we have a bigger military budget than every single European nation combined, and use a big chunk of it to protect you lot is kind of ridiculous. Also, I understand escapism, but acting like the US is a hellhole or the only first world nation with huge problems helps no one. Look at France, or England as a couple lovely examples too. Every country's got their problems. Acting like you're any different from us is dumb. The US isn't nearly as dumb or weak as some of you think, and acting like we aren't the biggest reason why Russia, and mainly China, let's be honest, the Russian government has shown themselves to be a fucking joke, from forcing their way into your spheres of influence and spreading a broken, awful ideology is lying to yourself. I love Europe, its history, the ancient empires and cultures that ran and still run through it, but I get sick of the constant shit talk and surprising amount of xenophobia you guys have. I guess I just don't get the ignorance towards American culture. I love hearing about the history and beliefs of other nations, I find it interesting. But a lot of you Europeans seem to have a weird habit of thinking America is a cultureless shitshow with nothing of value to provide. European leaders appeared to have a level of wisdom when it came to not all of them getting involved in the Iraq debacle. They coasted off this until Russia invaded Ukraine, and goddamn if half of them don't appear just as dumb as your average American president. Just roll the tape of all the Germans laughing at Trump when he told them they were compromising their national sovereignty and security by increasing natural gas imports from Russia. We're assholes, not gonna argue that. Most of us are polite and helpful. Not everyone, but my experience is that I can rely on other Americans abroad more than the locals. Not just because I'm American. I hear the same from locals about Americans wanting to help. That the US you see on the news, TV, or from high school kids on Reddit is nothing like what the US is really like. The US is less violent of dangerous, crime and gun violence is not something most people ever deal with, and most policemen retire having never pulled their fun from the holster. School shootings are a real thing that is horrific. Almost all issues in America can be distilled into one issue: we are a nation of immigrants that is still growing rapidly. The US legal population has grown by 65 million, likely another 20 million undocumented, in the last 30 years, roughly the population of the entire UK. There are likely over 350 languages are spoken. Try assimilating 10% of your population every 30 years. Our healthcare is one of the best in the world, if you have dollar and insurance. It issue is healthcare cost and access. Less than 10% of Americans do not have insurance. But we also subsidize your healthcare. You'll hear about medical bankruptcy, but our bankruptcy laws are very liberal compared to most EU countries. Our military budgets subsidize all of your defense. I could go on, but I believe the root cause of our issues of a massive size and rapid population growth. But our diversity is also our superpower. I don't think people really understand how young the US is. There are bars in Europe that are older than the US as a whole. America is one of the least racist places in the entire world. I've experienced more racism in Europe and Asia than the US. We praise your food, but the US is probably the ultimate food destination on the planet due to diversity. I've had great food in Europe and Asia. I can get it all and much more in the US. Conservative and liberal are largely meaningless labels engineered by the media to divide people. American people, regardless of their political leanings, tend to be some of the most friendly, thoughtful people in the world. We probably like you guys more than you like us. People own and operate firearms over here for a great number of valid reasons. While gun violence is a hot-button issue, the fact is that the overwhelming majority of guns in the US will never be used to commit a crime. Furthermore, the average gun owner is a law-abiding citizen. You aren't likely to be killed while you're over here, and the average American is more likely to risk their life to save yours than they are to take your life from you. Speaking of Europe, I'm looking forward to seeing all of you lovely European people next week for a backpacking trip. A lot of you are doing the same work and getting a lot less for it than you would in the US. Not if you're poor or close to it, then you're probably equivalent or better off in Europe. But if you are even moderately successful in your profession, then you're going to have a significantly lower standard of living in practical terms. When I lived in Frankfurt, my roommate had a computer science degree and a successful consulting firm, but still had to share an apartment with me and take the S-Bahn everywhere. I moved back to the States to make more money. He finally moved to Texas, the scourge of many Europeans' ideas of America, and now has a house. Still has everything he had in Europe, just now has more money, space, and independence. Everyone knows the US isn't perfect in this regard, but working hard in Europe doesn't really get you that much. I'm glad I was there when I was young, but as I've gotten older I've lost the desire to move back. I had a professional encounter with a British doctor about 5 years ago that required me to know his income. Dude made about $200K, in dollars. Which is nice. But given his speciality and experience, he would have been making close to $1 million in the US. Depending on the European country, your healthcare system sucks, too. I was shocked to find out that friends of mine were just paying for private insurance on top of the government healthcare they had already paid for, and that some of them were coming to the US for medical procedures because they couldn't get them scheduled because the government had decided that they weren't important enough. Part of the reason you have access to some of the drugs and procedures that were really expensive to develop is that the US taxpayers and patients are paying high prices. Then, after the company recoups the cost, they also sell them to countries with single-payer healthcare. Please note, I said too. Our system is awful. I hate it. Most Americans hate it. Crony capitalism. Edit, thanks for the award. My first. I have a friend from the Amsterdam area, and one thing he was super excited about moving to the US for was dental care. I had kind of operated under the assumption that free healthcare was quality healthcare, and that's just not the case. So while he was generally appreciative of it, the quality and accessibility in his experience was much better here. He's looking forward to getting his teeth fixed. Like everything, there's a spectrum. As a Brit, this may not be my place, but the European superiority complex over America is totally unearned. Most of the American people I have met are very friendly, hardworking, and open people. Lots of European people are somewhat less so. This may just be anecdotal, but I think there's a genuine cultural difference. As for American politics, which I have zero interest in and am sick of hearing about, most European countries have major political issues themselves and can't claim any serious moral high ground. Anyway, politics and the actual people of any country are very different things. Europeans shouldn't see our continent as some fantastic place that beats the rest, but just somewhere with many positive and negative attributes. This is the thing most people don't consider with American healthcare. A lot of insurance here sucks, but a lot of it is great too, and you have more options on a bigger spectrum. Personally, I'm on a few very new, expensive medications with no generic or biosimilar available, and I pay at most $25 for them. If I were on government insurance, state-funded Medicaid, then most of my medications would not be covered, and one of my treatments wouldn't be covered as often as I needed to be a functional person. Honestly, it feels to me like anti-Americanism is simply used as a form of cheap intellectualism. And it's not just here on Reddit or out there on the interwebs, but you can also see it in various philosophical texts from places like the Frankfurt School of Philosophy, where many authors used anti-Americanism as a rather common shibboleth, treating American commercial culture as if it were an irrational counterbalance to Nazi ideology. Seriously. Just look at Max Horkheimer or Theodor Adorno, for example. The funny part is that this idea that American cultural products are shallow lazy commercial nonsense and that Americans are brainwashed by shallow entertainment products into buying all sorts of useless shit fucking predates the commercialization of television by more than 10 years. The weird part is just how much has changed in the nearly a century since a lot of the anti-Americanism of the Frankfurt School, criticizing Americans as the sort of weird, mindless brainwashed alienated drones eating their mass-produced TV dinners while sitting mindless in front of the Autobahn. Never mind that these criticisms predate frozen TV dinners or, well, TV, for that matter. And yet the same criticisms from a century ago raised by men half a century dead is used as a standard mindless template about how horrible Americans are and how superior European cultural, political, and social thought is without ever having to even examine what it means to be American or what it means to be European. This is the best way to put it. The only problem I have with Europeans is the superiority complex. There is a lot of irony in the way some will call Americans obnoxious and boastful, while boasting about how their country is allegedly so much better. Many British people have criticized the fact that Roe v. Wade means that abortion is no longer a federally protected right. Which is deserved criticism, to be clear, but they seem to talk about this more than they do about the fact that abortion never has been fully protected in the UK. Legally it's only allowed when medically necessary. It's only performed otherwise due to a loose interpretation of a law, which could be more strictly enforced at any time with little to no changing of the laws. I've read on here before that Americans are just a lot more open about our problems. We have racism just like everybody else. We just don't try to hide it. Putting out issues out there for everyone to see helps to get them dealt with more easily. I've noticed that a sticking point about America for many European Redditors is the whole we're number one thing, but at this point that's near dead in America, while the smugness and superiority generated daily by terminally online Europeans is really something to behold. Trust me. As someone born in the US, most of us are sick to death of hearing about American politics as well. Unfortunately, so many people have based their whole personality and lives around their political beliefs. And they generally have the loudest voices. I've lived in Canada and Europe, Northern. Both places had issues, but I felt that they weren't talked about as much in Europe, or it was more of a oh well what can you do attitude. Love both places overall though, smiley face. I am a naturalized US citizen of Asian descent. I had the privilege of living in not just the US, but also in Britain, France, Germany, Poland, and more. This is coming from someone with a chip on his shoulder. I will be biased and 100% anecdotal, but I am amazed at the audacity the people of those nations to drag the US through the dirt and claim it is the worst nation, even as they are consuming US produce. I personally think that it isn't because they hate the US, but rather they hate that the hegemon is a young non-European nation. They hate the US not because of what they did, but because they want to be in our position of power.